Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm well. I'm well. It's good to see you.
Good to see your face. I'm realizing this is not just you and me. So I want to first welcome everyone who's on this stream, whose face I cannot see. And thank you for joining us on this special edition of Black Life, which is airing on Locally Grown TV. Thank you, Jamal, for helping set this up. Thank you to Dave Taylor at BMPFA for helping make this very streamlined. And before I forget, I want to remind people that they can get a poster for this event. I'm trying to see what the best angle for this camera is. Sorry for all the movement. And that poster link, request to find the poster link can be found in the right-hand side of your screen, I think. Apologies if I'm mistaken. But yes, welcome, Darol.
How's it going?
It's going okay, you know. I'm on Mountain Standard Time. I'm trying to understand what that means in relationship to everyone in my life. Nice. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm doing really well. I'm a little exhausted, but I feel like, you know, it was nice to kind of peek in and out and like listen to the broadcast and kind of notice like connecting threads that I didn't intentionally like go in there with, or wasn't like on the surface. So it was nice to kind of see that happen. But I'm good. I'm doing well.
I'm glad to hear. Thank you for making time for a quick chat. We have about 20 some minutes together. Had you seen this arrangement in its entirety before this? Or I know you're peeking in and out even now.
Mm-hmm. Not even, no. I mean, I kind of skimmed through it. I know I wanted to put things side by side because I felt like there was some type of force happening internally, like with the different conversations on like at the level of, you know, not just with, you know, my film in there, but the piece. There was like little connecting threads throughout, and I thought it might be interesting, but I hadn't seen it like play in full, where everything's like activated. You know what I mean? All the raw materials, all the source materials are now like activating, and like there's like this strand that like kind of was being passed. It's like ongoing conversation that I had hoped, like you always hope this thing kind of works, right? But actually like witnessing it and being like very aware of like the numerous conversations that are happening in relationship to the material.
Yeah. This process of creating from the archive is interesting, and I want to talk to you about the archive as medium.
Yeah.
Why do you think you're drawn to the archive in the first place?
I mean, I think initially out of necessity. You know, I have like a very you know, non-traditional approach with film, and so I didn't have access to, you know, cameras. I didn't have access to editing software and equipment. So part of it was like this deep urge to engage with the medium, being film, but then also being like, well, the thing that I have at my disposal are like, you know, found footage.
Yeah.
And I had like social media at the time. It was like that was my space of like putting these things next to each other. And in a sense, like collision editing was like a foundation. And it just seemed as if like found footage was perfect for that, right? Where I could put things that are not, you know, on the surface might not seem like they're related, but you put them together and there's a conversation that happens. Or you put them together and then this third meaning emerges, right? And that's independent of both. And so I think initially it was that, and part of it maybe is, you know, I don't think on my end personally, I didn't do it. In my family, traditionally, we haven't had like, you know, tons and tons of personal like material at our disposal. So it often comes from like a lack, like, you know, perceived lack as well, I think.
Yeah. So it comes from potentially this perceived lack, or this sort of sense of scarcity or sense of access to something and not another thing. And when you're creating, for example, your film, which was included in the screening, I ran from it. What what does the archive do as a medium when it's interacting with things that you have maybe intentionally shot for a film or specifically shot for a film that you're making? And what are those things, sort of seamless pieces in your eyes, or are they like using two different types of paintbrushes? Like, what is an interesting analogy to understand how they work together?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great analogy, like with the painting and like the brush stroke or whatnot. I do think there were some things that I did shoot like myself. I'm always like hesitant to like say what I shot in the film and what it's kind of like found. But yeah, it's like I shot like original material, and I do think it provides like a different texture to it, and even stuff that I shot without the intention of it being a film, right? The
Right.
stuff I just captured, those moments with my children were really something that just happened because they were leaving in a month, to go to Philly, and we just wanted to just capture everything. And this is a year before the film was even thought of or was
Right.
unfolding. But I do think like those moments are often brought in, um, and to I'm thinking of like the painting analogy, but also for me, I like proximity or like the closeness. For me, my work typically, it feels like it's trying to be microscopic, right?
Yeah.
Instead of focus on the macro. So for me, those personal moments or the moments where I'm, shooting the stuff that I've shot myself enters into that film and in relationship to the found footage. I think those are moments when I could either, hone in on a particular moment, and that's like a, kind of, it might function like a jump cut, right? Something that instead of jarring you, I'm kind of trying to do something different. I'm trying to kind of like, connect with some like internal type of moving, or maybe not just a jump cut, but even go back to like the painting. I think it just kind of adds like a texture that's felt. So really including like these felt experiences, that allows us to move from the personal to the collective, right? And kind of blending those two together.
Yeah, yeah. I think, I mean, it works really beautifully, and it's two sort of different kinds of invitations for me as a viewer. And other times, sometimes you feel where that one line ends and the other begins, and other times it feels just like a nice sort of dizzying blend, which has a lovely effect on its own. So as part of your time here at Black Life, which is a program at the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive, you've dug around the Pacific Film Archive, which is where some of these selections for this visual mix came from. And then another program you did for us happened on Sunday, which was an audio experiment called a prelude to Keeping Time. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that and what that was like, what stringing together that project was like, as opposed to this screening that we just witnessed.
Yeah, I want to say thank you too. Just the opportunity to kind of sit with both projects and moments were really fulfilling and nourishing creatively. Yeah, man. Let me shout out to the Pan African People's Orchestra, Michaela, the whole art team, and everyone who contributed and helped out with the project in terms of bringing that together. Um, the Sunday string, it was just great. Like it was really just us. So Keeping Time is the next project I'll be. It's already like in pre-production, and so I thought it would be a nice introduction, to really just sit with Michaela, who is like closely tied to the film, but then also Jamar Williams, who's an amazing, musician, drummer, and artist, extremely like innovative, right? And he's also um, a part of the collaborative team with the film in terms of when we think about like sound design,
Mhm.
and so forth. And so for me, it was like really great to be like, what does that look like? And I'm a fan and admirer of both. Like, what does that look like? And they hadn't previously met. So I was like, what does that kind of collision look like in terms of discovering or maybe mapping out or tracing kind of the arcs, you know, um, universe in relationship to to sound, to the music, but also kind of the relationship between the music and other sounds, because there's like video based audio that's in there as well, from different, kind of things that were pulled. But really it was a conversation. So it was in hopes of facilitating not just that conversation, but also the conversation between Michaela and Jamar. So Michaela basically constructed like an art playlist, right? That just described the universe of the art past and present. And then I had Jamar respond to that list, right? Just like what call and response, like what do you feel? And so that's kind of how that came together. And then we had all the playlist ready, like the combined playlist ready. And then we worked together, myself and my editing team. My guy John was essential to that in terms of kind of seamlessly bringing that together, right? Going from music to, whether it be the audio or whether it be the actual conversation, and just trying to get into like a nice little rhythm. So that was like the gist of that process.
Yeah, it came out super beautiful. And we had a brief conversation about it that I want to bring to this space, which was around, well, how I understood it anyway, was around what myths you want to break with your work and what myths you want to make with your work. So tell me about your approach to this film, Keeping Time, and what sort of myths you're trying to break with how you're creating the story.
Yeah, no, this is like the first time I've even like talking about the film, so this is pretty cool. Yeah, I think maybe the dominant thing is just when we think about jazz representation, in film, documentary, even features, the majority of this stuff is like focusing on kind of the creative explosion that happens on the bandstand, right? It's often kind of just like the intense performing aspect of it, but after I've been reading, tons of material and just like through the research process, and really sitting with the art, but not just the art, but like Robert D.G. Kelly's like Monk biography and any jazz related biography, autobiography I can get my hands on. And if you listen to the musicians, they talk about how much, what happens on the bandstand is really like a product of the relationships that they have, right? I remember listening and like going to the back of like a lot of Monk's records, and there's so many that are just dedicated to like family members, to friends, right? So for me, with Keeping Time, I'm more interested not in the music or the performance of the music, right? I'm very interested in using, music as the connective tissue, but not like the power behind the film. For me, the power lies in the relationships that are formed between the musicians and their spiritual ancestors, between the musicians and their family, and the musicians and where they're from, their environment, their community. And the Pan-African People's Orchestra, like, it's just so ripe, for that conversation. And a lot of these thoughts, were kind of brought about, I would say for me, Horace Tapscott was like is like a spiritual guide for me in a certain sense. And so I've been kind of sitting with him and his work for a while. And this just felt like a really interesting way to approach it, in terms of this, short narrative work in and around these questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you said a phrase to me, which I want to bring to the space again, about investigating context beyond the space of a stage or beyond the space of a performance. So I love the idea that a music documentary can be curious about not just what happens on the stage, but in fact everything else, and not just everything else, like the sort of, glamorous or unglamorous aspects of musician life, of that sort of, rock and roll type documentary where they focus maybe on the sex and the drugs and this, but the aspect of community, which seems to be such a foundational value for the orchestra.
Yeah.
So if those are the myths you're breaking, tell me about, this investigation of context as a myth-making activity of being deeply curious about everything that surrounds the stage.
Yeah, there's just so many things at play. Like it's really layered, right? So, I mean, initially it was like this hybrid, docufiction, then documentary, and now it's more so kind of, I mean, the narrative with like documentary storytelling, like elements in there, but who knows, it might like continue to change. Um, in my mind, for me, the interesting things were, you know, just the assumptions, like even with kind of the art, but maybe with, to take it back to like the music in general, like a lot of jazz musicians in LA specifically, like the generation, like Horace's generation or the generation before him actually like learned from like a lot of private teachers. There's like a huge private teachers like community, right? And a lot of folks learn in their household. And like Horace, he's very open about it and says like, I was taught, my mother taught me this music, my father taught me this music, so on and so forth. Um, and the same as like if you go to like Thelonious Monk in terms of like, there's like so many unrecognized people who have a hand in kind of cultivating these musicians, right? But what we often get as a byproduct of like the images and the films are like this notion and the myth of like and I wouldn't say myth, but like well, yeah, it's the myth, like the isolated musical genius, right? Decontextualized from their community, like they just emerge out of nowhere playing fantastically,
Mm-hmm.
right? Without kind of seeing them, kind of as products of their community, right? In terms of the traditions that are passed on and the like how that actually comes together and form. And the musicians talk like very clearly about it, you know. But oftentimes in the films, it's been relegated to kind of just, these maybe snippets. I remember there's I forget the name of the Monk doc, but like the best parts of that doc are like everything that happens off the stage, like for me at least, right? That like, or not the best, I would say for me, the most interesting aspects of it that I'm very curious about are just like the stuff that happens off the stage.
Mm-hmm.
Music's not, when music's like not being created or not being played, but that's exactly and precisely when like these seeds are being like, planted, for me at least.
Right. And in that investigation, I guess, of context, how does the archive play a role in creating that, or ephemera, and other sort of, yeah,
Yeah,
looking at what's already happened, especially with the orchestra?
yeah, I think that's a really great question. Yeah, for me, they're like kind of echoes to play with, echoes in time and through time. Um, and I'm actually trying to shift my approach in this upcoming piece where, of course, there'll be like some audio or there'll be archival components in my mind, but mostly like video-based audio or, not, I don't want to say not, imagery or whatnot, but I'm thinking of like weaponizing the archive in a different way where it's kind of like, maybe more spread out or where I'm not using a ton of material, right? Where it's just kind of
Mm-hmm.
very intentional and at certain moments with, their own um, kind of meaning or just like this openness at a particular moment, one or two spots, like nothing, like, I ran from, which is mostly or primarily, based on like found footage.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a way to, I want to blur the line between the past and the present. And I think the audio or the archive is going to, help in that, especially in the post phase. And yeah, I can't predict it. You know what I mean? I can't predict even the other materials, other ephemera, like how it might appear. A lot of these things are really like kind of just getting out the way and allowing them to happen and hopefully being aware enough to, be able to like identify, and recognize those moments. Um, yeah, I think it's mostly based on like intuition too, just being perceptive enough to kind of identify where these connections are being had or conversations are being had, and how to just really step out the way and allow them to happen. Don't mess them up.
I think, yeah, that perspective obviously also makes the archive less daunting as this, you know, um, almost shapeless and ubiquitous, or kind of an infinity of material. And makes it much more approachable. So talk to me about how you select from that space in a way, or how you interact with the archive in general, so that it does not feel daunting, but rather it feels like an invitation to have it and interfere or interspersed with the work that you're creating.
Yeah, there's like, of course, right, a ton of material to choose from, and it's like overwhelming. Um, yeah, I think I start from a place of like knowing that I'm not trying to master the archive at all. You know, I'm not going to gain an overwhelming like experience of what is in here, because there's so much missing already, right? Like even to begin with. So I guess part of it is one, just identifying kind of what pricks me or like what moves me, right? Like just watching a ton of stuff and kind of that ritualistic and like durational practice of just sitting, one, being still and engaging with something, you know, and watching something for a period of time. You know, I kind of lean towards that, kind of, and pride myself on kind of like finding these details or like being able to watch something for hours just for that, you know, 30-second, you know, chunk in like the last 15 minutes or something like that, right? And so part of it is, I haven't even thought about this, but maybe it's, you know, meditative a little bit, kind of just like sitting with material. And it's not passively just embracing it, it's listening and kind of being aware. I'm not writing any notes, but I'm just like taking it in. Um, and sometimes the visuals might move me, like with the last piece that showed about the dozen roses, the imagery and the juxtaposition between like, you know, the dumps and like the folks kind of picking stuff up out of kind of these piles of like piles of like trash or whatnot, with like the birds flying, like that juxtaposition immediately stood out to me, right? And made me think of even kind of that sequence in I Ran From It with
Mhm.
the
With the
bird.
reverberation.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
murmuration, you know what I mean? So that was like, oh wait, that's something there, you know, and even or even just like the poetic nature of it. And the same could be said for a lot of pieces in it, but it's really just like sitting with things. And I remember like maybe it was like weeks apart, I watched the Angela Davis conversation and the Bobby Seale conversation. Both are conversations while they were like incarcerated, right? And so understanding, and even Angela's conversation kind of starting and being about like what is a revolutionary, what constitutes Black revolutionary practice,
Right.
and then going to Bobby Seale and it being him, it's him recollecting or remembering, you know, kind of going through these childhood memories of like food, right, and you know ideas of culture, still in the same context, but then also tying that into the political work and kind of conflating that line between the personal and the political, where he's able to talk about childhood memories of how he toasts a piece of bread, but also talk about the Panthers and also talk about the work they're doing, but also talking about, you know, prisoner consciousness and just all these interesting things. And even visually, that was interesting, right? So a lot of things is either I could be pricked or like moved by the visuals and visual juxtapositions that might appear. But then also it's all, you know, it's kind of these little nuggets, right? And how I approached this exercise, I call it an exercise. Like it was really just about kind of seeing if, you know, what conversations would emerge. And I didn't have any predetermined idea. I'm glad it came together really well. Well, I think it came together really well.
Yes, it did.
Um,
It did.
but yeah, I didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I think good things happened, and hopefully we'll have an archive of this recording up for folks to enjoy and consume. I want to thank Locally Grown again as we're wrapping up, and the folks over at BAM-PFA who made this possible, Dave Taylor and David Wilson, and Ryan Austin Dennis, who's my co-curator at Black Life. And I want to thank you, Darol, for your stay with us. It's been really lovely to have you and have these conversations um, about work, about your work and the work that you're interested in. So yeah, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, no, I just wish we had much more time, and just thank you and much gratitude to you and just throughout this entire process, and everyone involved. I don't want to forget anyone, but especially like even our conversation. I wish we had time to talk about. I mean, you're brilliant, and I just want to like stop there for a second, just say that. And then even,
That's,
I know we had to talk a couple, maybe yesterday about negative space,
yes.
everything that
You
you,
know, it's so funny. I went back to read an interview of yours I bookmarked on Bomb Magazine, and you talked about negative space in that interview, and I thought, how funny. Like, it's just that occurred to me, and then those were your words. So
and
a lot of,
it's an honor
yeah.
to have a conversation with you.
Thank you. That's very kind. It's my honor, and it's been a pleasure. And we'll keep talking, and maybe some of it will end up in a public archive.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Of course. Have a beautiful night.
You too.